All right. Well, it was fun meeting you in real life over there in San Jose.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a good time. Um, Definitely, it would have been. I can see where it could have calmed down, and you could get down to a smaller group that want to keep talking when you're not bound by time. Uh, yeah, and I was shocked at how many people were there. That was a solid group.
I wasn't surprised at all. I just had a meetup in the last two successive weeks. I had meetups in Southern California, and the last one we started at 7. We were in this clubhouse till 10, and then at 10 we went back to John Van Donk's living room, and we were there till quarter after 12. And
Oh,
if
wow.
some people didn't still have to drive an hour and a half in Southern California traffic, it could have gone to the wee hours of the morning. Uh, people were enjoying the conversation that much, so it was lots of
That's
fun.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I wish I was closer and could partake more regularly of the meetings.
Yeah, it's really been fun. There are with our group in Sacramento, many people have to confess just how much they love that group, just because the conversation is is predictably really good, and
Yeah,
that's unusual. That's
it is.
unusual, especially
It's
for groups that get together and there's no agenda.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So
finding those types of spaces is very difficult. They're rare.
yeah, they really are. They really are. And so when you have them, you really value them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what you have on your mind to talk about today? Talking about good conversation.
Well, I had a couple things. I figured that I would continue some of the story, although a separate narrative line that was kind of running concurrently with this other stuff. Um, One of the things I noticed watching the replay of our last conversation is I kept referencing that time period as like, oh, when I was young. And I thought it was strange because I'm obviously still young. But that decade was
Hmm.
particularly long, right? Like remembering back when I was 18 feels like a really different person. And just like the mode I was operating from was so, what's it, like pleasantly naive. Not like a negative version, but just kind of like, oh, let's wander around and go check out weird things and have a good time and see if I can find something.
Well, I would imagine, time is
Yeah.
this really weird thing where, if you're at home in your normal routine, going to work, time seems to just zip through. Then
Yeah.
if you make a trip, you get into a new space. I mean, it's a psychological dynamic that you're experiencing all these new things. I would
Yeah.
imagine that whole decade of your life must have just been so packed with new experience that it's an
Yes.
elongated time.
Yes. Well, and it's weird too because it kind of flip-flops back and forth between like getting into a routine and then you get these quick little zips of time and then these really big events that slow everything down. They stand out so much more brightly in my memory.
Yep.
Um yeah. So I guess I'll kick right into it. Um Yeah, okay. So I think we left off last time at Cult 3, which was the guy in Idaho. So I'm actually going to go. I just talked to my friend yesterday, too, the one that I went there and to Hawaii with, and we had a good conversation. But we were reminiscing about that time in Idaho and just how very silly it was. But yeah, so I'm going to go back in time now for a moment. So after coming back from Hawaii, I came back to the mainland with the girl that I met there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and we initially moved into, my dad has like a little almost like an apartment loft above separate garage he has at his house. So we were living there for a few months, and then eventually we moved into a cabin up on the Olympic Peninsula up in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a crazy, that by itself was a crazy little, it was a one-room cabin built by this, as far as I can tell, totally nuts hippie back in the 60s. So he lived in this one-room cabin. I mean, 20 feet, 25 feet by 25 feet.
Yeah, yeah.
He lived in it with his wife and 6 daughters. They had no electricity. They had no running water. He had the most ridiculous contraption of pipes, like literally hung by fabric from the trees, running from a creek into the house so that they had some work with. I don't know how he did this. And he lived like that for, I think it was 5 or 6 years. And the family did a homesteading thing. They had a whole garden. They cleared a bunch of land in the front of the property. It was a 10-acre piece of property. And for these 5 or 6 years, they lived in this cabin, and he built this like literal castle up at the top hill of the I mean, it was the most ridiculous building you've ever seen. It by no means could you get building codes to build this nowadays. Huge, like 5-story, basically tree house with very strange. But so yeah, we moved into the little cabin that he had stayed in originally, and by then it had running water and electricity, so it was a bit easier to live in, although still pretty difficult. So yeah, we were pretty isolated. We were in Squim, is the name of the town, and it's pretty much a retirement community. So there was like literally 3 people that we knew in their 20s. So we were pretty isolated. We were kind of out a little ways from anything, and then the story starts to get really weird at this point. So, as if it wasn't weird enough,
weird already.
Yes, this is weird in a different dimension. So, it was mostly going okay. It was pretty difficult living, like I said. I didn't chop enough wood in the summer. So in the winter, it
You're
rained.
a modern person. You're not. You haven't been trained by other people who have to live. You make all the typical survival mistakes, and the net is going to have to bail you out. So go on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't even get a I just had to work stupidly difficult to keep it functioning. It was basically the bailout. So every morning I'd wake up at about 5 or 6. This cabin literally just had plywood for walls. There's holes in the floor, so the cold air just dumped in. And this was like the coldest winter in 40 years up there or something. It got down into the teens, which is not common for that area. Our giant wood pile was out front, the unchopped wood. It rained and then froze. And I don't know if you've ever had to deal with wood that has been soaked through and then frozen into an ice block, but I mean, it is indestructible. So it took about a large round, maybe a round and a half, to have enough wood for the day to keep the place warm. I'd get out of bed at about 6 o'clock in the morning from the nice cozy electric blanket.
You had electricity.
Yes, we had electricity.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And kind of had running water. We had running water most of the year until the winter, and then the pipes froze. So we went about 2 to 3. It was probably about 2 months solid with no water in the winter. So we were taking sponge baths from the heating water on the wood stove, and every time you had to go to the bathroom, you had to pull a sled with a bucket out to the creek and fill it up with water so you could put it into the back of the tank. Yeah. Oh, the wood chopping. Yeah. So 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd get a little fire going from wood from the day before, go out there. It would take 45 minutes of pounding a wedge with a sledgehammer just so that I could not have to hold the wedge. So it would be about half an inch into the wood after 45 minutes of pounding on this thing. And then it was pretty easy from there. Once you could stand it up, I could pull out the large sledgehammer and go to town on it. But so I'd chop wood for about an hour, hour and a half every morning. And then I'd go to work. I was working at a bird food place, ridiculous, like garden center, but focused around feeding birds. And it was crazily successful. The entire,
This
retirement
community.
Yes, exactly. I mean, crazy at pulling in $3,000 a day in bird food is absolute and just silliness. But I would move all the bags of bird food. So I was, slinging 20-pound bags all day and then chopping the wood. And it's a pretty tiring way to go about things, although survivable.
Yeah.
And this continued on decently. There was some issues until we got into a car accident. It was raining, and a guy was coming out of the casino near our house, and just pulled out. It's a tiny little 2-lane highway. He pulls out from the stop sign and then just stops in the middle of the lane because he saw us coming. And he's in a full-size truck. I'm in like a 91 Crown Vic. Just ridiculous, all solid steel, 6,000, probably not that much, but 5,000-pound vehicle.
Yeah.
We hit him. I braked, the brakes locked. We just slid right into him at about 50 miles an hour. And I got shingles, strangely enough, from that car accident. But we were mostly okay. No, I had bad whiplash. My neck, I still can't look down for extended periods, but nothing super bad. But it was after that things started going off the tracks. So the girl, who was totally normal, really nice, good-hearted person, she started going crazy. So, and this kind of kicks in later, it was a really bizarre, when she finally did go and get diagnosed, they actually didn't have a diagnosis for her. They thought it might have been some bizarre mixture of schizophrenia with bipolar disorder, but it escaped normal categorizations.
How old was she?
She was at that time 25.
Yeah.
And I was 20. Which is pretty late.
Yeah.
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
They say like 27, 28 is usually the latest a person will develop that type of thing if they're going to.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this was really bizarre, and it ties into my experience with Cult 4, which I haven't talked about eventually, which is why I'm telling it. But she started having all kinds. It was really strange, because what it felt like is she got this tremendous burst of nervous, and not like nervous as in, but literally your nervous system. And she was pulling things, for lack of a better word, it was like psychic. Like she was telling me things that she couldn't possibly have known, and they were accurate, which was bizarre. Where to put that, I don't know. So reporting what I experienced. And then that you could almost feel like little wiggles, or like if you're imagining a straight line, something would smack into it and it would start to kind of warble off of this path, if you will. and those warbles intensified. You know, she started having really intense past life memory experiences,
Hmm.
which was also very strange because watching her have them was triggering it in me as well, particularly ones where I was also in the stories. And it's a really bizarre sensation. You can't, you know, the easy explanation is, of course, that your mind is latched onto something and it's manifest like a dream, a
Right.
waking dream, basically, and it's
Right.
creating a whole scenario around it.
Right.
Very well could have been what it was. The the bizarre part is how intensely real it feels and how the depth of the emotional experience that it brings forward. So I'm dealing with this. I'm still keeping the chopping the wood, going to work. She quit her job. She was working at a dairy farm and just couldn't do it anymore. Um, and again, we're isolated. We don't have, you know, people around us to help kind of provide a sense of normalcy or a buffer or
Yep.
anything, you
Yep.
know.
Yep. Well, it's interesting because I mean, we seldom realize how critical the people around us are for our own equilibrium.
Yeah.
So if you're
Oh,
living in a
absolutely.
relatively isolated circumstance with a woman who has the early signs of schizophrenia and or bipolar,
Yeah.
yeah, that's going to do something to you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. 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 And so actually, I wanted to use this to explain an idea that I've been thinking about, which is um, what I've been calling axial possession.
Hmm.
So there's, and this is relating to largely that name just came from watching Vervaeke's videos talking about the axial age.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you know, the word axial is interesting. It's actually talking about axis, like adding a you know, z dimension to your x and y grid.
Yep.
But I thought it was interesting too, just because it phonetically has that similarity to axiom,
Hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's, there's a little tie in there that might be useful.
A
Um,
resonance.
yes. Um, so the way I've been thinking about it is that technically, if you're using like mimetic possession being the larger category, and if you're using it in the way that I think it was Dawkins that came up with the word meme, I think. Um, but this axial possession would then be a subcategory of types of mimetic, you know, behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I find it useful to use the more colloquial meaning of meme, which is usually a little lighter, you know, kind of like how we view memes on the internet
Yep.
or those types of things,
Yep.
just so to kind of differentiate the two. Um, the way I describe it is like if you've got a constellation or a grid with a bunch of data points, right? Um, a meme, then when a new meme enters, what it looks like is a different constellation between those data points. So you're
Mm-hmm.
linking them in a novel way, and it's
Mm-hmm.
creating some new picture that haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, whereas axial possession would be suddenly realizing that there is a dimension to these data points that you were blatantly unaware of before.
Hmm.
So, right, you're taking your 2D
Yep.
image,
Yep.
your familiar framework, and
Yep.
suddenly there's a new direction to it. What you
Yep.
thought was a 2D picture is actually a three-dimensional picture. And
Yep.
right. Um,
There, I'll give an example of that. I think I was reading Michael Pollan's book on psychedelics, and it's actually in Pacific Northwest. He's dealing with a guy who's super into mushrooms, and this guy can basically rewrite the story of history, the history of civilization via mushroom spores. And,
Yes.
that adds an X. So you have all these data points that we're very familiar with. This guy comes along and says, did you ever consider the role that fungus plays in civilization? And it's like,
Yes.
fungus.
This storyline hiding beneath the story you're familiar with
exactly
changes the context of all your familiar data points.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. What did you call it again? That's an axial.
I've been calling it axial possession because
possession. That's interesting.
I use the word possession because colonization might be a more familiar, like how you use the word.
Yes.
But it's kind of like we don't have really control over it, right? It kind of enters and then it takes us over. It's, so I use the word possession just because that generally is what it feels like. Granted, we'll reverse and, we'll rationalize it to ourselves to make it within our power again,
Well, once we call something, it helps us play with it. If you don't have a label for it or a name for it, you can't really manipulate it and try it out. And you might change the label sometime, but there's a reason that label sticks, and I can very much understand where you're going with it. So that's why I wanted to see if I could try an illustration on you to see if I had the concept that you're working with. So no, definitely. I think it's a really cool idea.
Although now I'm probably going to take it into weirder territory. So
okay.
We're still kind of playing with in the realm of the mind in a sense. So I want to force it a little deeper into our phenomenological experience.
Okay.
Another way of thinking of the I lost that thought. Darn it. Okay. Anyways. Just another way to think of axial functioning in this sense would be jumping meta layers. So it's that like you're moving in a dimension you didn't know was part of the situation.
Yep.
Now the way I've been thinking about or contextualizing this, and this is how it ties back to the story I was telling, is that mimetic possession is generally in the mind. It's a new idea that restructures how we're thinking about things, whereas axial possession feels more like a switch in the experience of reality itself. So it's a change in how we're perceiving reality before we're making sense of reality. So what's interesting when you meet people, it could be lots of different figures. In this case, for me, it was watching her experience of these realities that I was unaware of. But the peculiar thing about it was that the feeling emanating off of her overpowered my sense of reality. It was like she was perceiving something more real than what I knew reality to be. And you might, more familiar metaphor might be a figure like Christ, right? It's not so much what he's saying or doing necessarily. Granted, that's how we interact with it now through the book, but it's almost like his experience of reality is so overpowering that people cannot help but like fall into how he's experiencing reality.
Yep. Oh, charisma. I mean, that's essentially the definition of the word charisma.
Yes, absolutely. That's interesting. It's like a epiphenomena of this phenomenological thing we're dealing with. I don't even know what that is. Cues we're picking up from others.
Well, I just finished the video. I just finished right now. I'm thinking about Jonathan Haidt, who's kind of the adult in the room, and Jordan Peterson. Why does Jordan Peterson take off? Well, the word we'd say is charisma. Jonathan Haidt's a very brilliant, a wonderful thinker. But when you listen to him talk, he's measured, he's calm, he's plain, he's, Jordan Peterson, he sets the world on fire because that's just how he is. It's charisma.
Yeah, well, it's charisma and a deep feeling of on honesty. I think honesty is the right word.
Authenticity.
Authenticity. Yes.
Yeah.
What he's describing, you can tell he's experiencing it.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not ideas that he's playing with. It's like he's trying to translate what he's actually experiencing and how he,
Right.
has a different feeling to it, for
Yep.
lack of a better word.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what I was experiencing with this situation, where literally my experience of reality was starting to dissolve under the weight of her experience of reality. And this was having like actual, very real phenomenological effects on me, So the story doesn't get much better from there. It keeps escalating.
That's usually what happens with these situations.
Yeah. At one point I'm spending 10 hours a day on the days I could, just explaining the rudiments of human interaction and, little detail, like why are people responding to me this way, and just mapping out basic what we normally assume and just function on, which was probably actually a great useful exercise.
For you learned a lot through it. She learned nothing.
No. But it did seem to have the effect of like grounding her, of keeping the symptoms from flaring up too much.
Okay.
At least for a while, because I mean we're talking about a year-long period here, or a little less than that, but
wow.
Eventually it starts going too far off the rails. I can't handle it and keep a job going. I'm driving her. She's having heavy duty suicidal ideation. I'm driving her to emergency rooms. I'm taking her to therapists. Basically, like, someone help me. I don't know what to do with this situation. I eventually tell my dad, who's down at the southern border of Washington, just out of Portland, Oregon, some of what's going on, and ask him if I can move back in. He says yes, so we go down there, and things just keep getting wilder.
She goes with you to live with your father?
What was that?
She goes with you?
Yes. Yeah. Her family lives on the East Coast, so there wasn't much of a support structure there.
Does her family know what's happening?
Kind of.
Oh.
So, at one point she like called them at 3:00 in the morning, just like yelling and screaming at them for, all this stuff. She had memories come up of, she grew up in Saudi Arabia. Her dad worked for an oil company as a data analyst. And she had a memory come up that she was abused as a child by the guy that worked in the house. And so her mom, apparently, I think, was a therapist. So when she told her this story, the mom immediately cast doubt on it, which
didn't go well.
Did not go well. It didn't go well. And I didn't handle, I mean, again, I'm 20. I don't have skills.
What do you know?
This. Yeah. I'm like trying to do everything I can. At one point I called her mom up and was like, what the what is wrong with you? Like, how, that's not, you're a therapist. You know better than to just flat out go, you're full of, that's gaslighting like 101. You can't do that. I'm saying it much nicer now, but I was rough. So their parents knew of the situation. They didn't know the extent of it. I should have, looking back, if I was more mature, I would have reached out to them. And like, this is beyond what I can handle. I need your guys' help. Like, something's wrong. But
you're a kid.
Yeah.
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Yeah. Plus, I'm going through it. I'm in a much more manic state than my baseline as well. So it's, we move back in. Eventually, the voices start she's now hearing voices. It's moved out of the realm of just memory. She thinks she's talking to ghosts and something.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, so we moved back in with my dad. At one point, we have a friend of ours try and do an exorcism.
Try anything, baby.
Anything.
Try anything.
Well, and this is like after going through 6 therapists. Like we tried energy healers and just.
What's it gonna hurt? You know?
Yeah,
what's it gonna hurt?
Give it a go. And then finally, the voices turned on me. So they had turned on her a while ago. They'd turned on most people in her life and her support structures.
Yeah.
And then they finally turned on me.
Yeah.
She left, went and rented a place. She got in contact with her parents. They helped her pay for it and stuff. And then I didn't see her for a couple months or something. And I'm wondering, like, what is happening here?
Sure.
And then I get a call one night at like 10 o'clock at night saying she's lost in Portland and can I come pick her up? So, and something is clearly really wrong at this point,
Yeah.
She didn't even know how to locate herself. I was like giving her directions on look for the green signs on the corners of blocks and tell me what they say. I go and pick her up and I'm just trying to like be very calm and as inviting as I can and ask questions. And she's like locked up, like almost a weird mixture of terrified and almost not there at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she's now on psychiatric medication or what the deal is. I take her back to her house. I don't hear anything again for several weeks. And then I get a call from, actually, I think it was longer. I get a call from her family at one point. And what had ended up happening is that she believed she was the Antichrist. And thus she was trying to kill herself by jumping in front of cars because she thought that if she didn't kill herself, then the rest of the world would end.
Oh.
So that's,
Yeah. Sad story. Sad story.
Yeah, it was rough. So, and her family flew out at that point. They took care of her.
Yep.
It took, as far as I could tell, I had very little contact with her after all of this.
Yep.
But, now she's married and has kids and seems stable. And
wow, good.
Yeah, she recovered.
They pretty decent. They can do a lot with schizophrenia if people are willing to be treated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think like a big part of it too was actually like having a family and being surrounded by her family. That really reinforced peer group that could help her contextualize.
That's right. It's the story outside and the story inside, and getting those right together.
Yes.
That's a big part of what we experience as sanity.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, when they don't, that dissonance becomes very chaotic. At its potential, it becomes very chaotic.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how that story went. And I say this because mostly I'm familiar with this. If you're going by Indian traditions, so like Hinduism, they would have called this a premature Kundalini awakening. So their whole mythology is you've got the basic life energy down at the base of your spine, 2 inches below the navel. The whole spiritual mission is moving this energy up through the body and out through the crown. So generally, and then they build up huge religious systems, basically purification systems, so that you can handle raising this energy up through the body. When you haven't done that, then what happens is all of these funky bits and blockages and fears and all those types of things that are hiding in your body get pumped full of this basic life energy, and they start manifesting as actual experience or all those types of things. Now you can take whatever you want from that. It was useful for me in contextualizing it. Oh, the point though is that when this happens, it seems like people default to one of two positions. I keep moving my head away from the microphone, sorry. One of two positions, which is either they're the Christ or they're the Antichrist.
It's interesting. Uh-oh. Hope I didn't lose him.
I don't know why it's cutting out.
So the Christ or the Antichrist, that's where you dropped out.
Yes. Yeah, which gives it a very particular character. And yeah, what was useful for this experience is that I saw the same thing happen in Cult 4, where you have this burst of energy and it feels very true. And then something a little hiccup, a bump in the road, because there's so much energy behind it, it just goes flying off the tracks.
So where was Cult 4? You're living with your father in Southern Washington, and
yes. So then, yeah, let's continue that storyline, and then it'll branch all the way to Cult 4. So I spent the following year and a half extremely depressed. I was working at a coffee shop, basically just miserable. After about a year, I started like, okay, I should continue on with my life. I started rock climbing. They opened a gym in our town, and I was like, oh, that'll be fun. And that was really helpful. I met a group of friends finally, and started interacting with a little culture and having a good time and getting physical exercise, and started coming back to life and moving on. And then in that time frame is when I went to Cult 3. So I had started rock climbing, I was getting back into stuff, and then I was like, my friend hit me up, and we went off to Idaho to go try this thing. After Cult 3, I came back still at Dad's, and then I got diabetes. So I was rock climbing a lot. Suddenly, the symptoms of diabetes are pretty overtly obvious. You start peeing like way too much. I had no energy. Every time I'd eat anything that had carbohydrates in it, I would fall asleep. Like I couldn't physically stay awake. And I was in this state for like 4 months before I finally took a blood sugar test. Yeah, my face was sunken in, and like you just have no water in your body, and your body is using fat and muscle as its energy source because it can't use sugar as an energy source. So I just dropped I've always been pretty skinny, but this was like skeletal. And then I went out to breakfast one morning with my dad, and after eating, I was falling asleep, and he's like, I had told them before, like, I think I might have diabetes. So we went to the Walgreens and picked up a blood sugar test kit. My blood sugar was 756. Yeah.
Baby, you're alive.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. We go to the emergency room. They draw the blood. They do the arterial blood, which is horrifying to have done. I don't know if you've had arterial blood drawn, but they have to go down into the middle of your arterial blood's running in the core of your tissue. And it's wrapped in nerves. And it's really hard to get at because they don't know if they're getting at it. They're just stabbing repeatedly, hoping they get into the thing. Yeah, but anyways, yeah, my blood is literally like molasses. There's just no water in it. It's got so much sugar in it that it's like syrup, really thick.
Yeah.
I weighed 130 pounds. I'm 5'11", so that's pretty.
That's pretty thin for 5'11".
Yes. They've pumped me back. I spent a week in the hospital. They pumped me back full of water. I literally just inflated like a balloon, like just soaking up all the water, and got me on insulin. I'm type 1 diabetic, which is really weird for it to come up at 23.
Yeah.
That's pretty late.
Yeah.
Used to be called juvenile onset diabetes.
Yeah.
It's an autoimmune disorder where your immune system kills the beta cells in your pancreas, and thus you can't produce insulin, or its opposite, glucagon. So yeah, that was like a pretty strong setback. That was right after I turned 23. I went through that, and in December of that year, that was in October, I was diagnosed. So just a few months after, basically as soon as I had gotten it to where I could control it on my own easily and somewhat familiar with it, is when I moved down to Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Yeah. So moved down to Santa Cruz. I start up a little wood shop. I'm a craftsman, I guess you could say. I make knives, bows, like archery equipment, clothing, etc. I get that going. That was after taking a class for making guitars, which is what this guitar I don't know if you can see it on the video. No, you can't. So that was like, again, my answer to homesteading was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to, I have no interest in leaving the homestead every day to go work 8 hours at a job and then come back and try and keep that going. So I'm trying to figure out how can I earn money at the location. I do that for a while. I'm rock climbing a lot. And yeah, life pretty much stabled out for the most part, and I was feeling good and doing good, and I ended up getting a job. Oh yeah, this is the next area, with a jewelry company that makes wooden pendants out of pine cones. They're very well known in the New Age circuit, and they sell all their stuff at the big music festivals. And that was a great job, really. It was just like a group of friends hanging out in a garage every day making pendants. It was pretty fun. And that continued for a while. I started to get pretty burnt out on the work because it was extremely repetitive. I was responsible for putting the epoxy coating on them.
They're very pretty. I just Googled them right now, and they're quite
Oh,
lovely.
really? Yeah. Third eye pine cones. Yeah.
Yeah. They're very lovely.
They are. Yeah. And yeah, I guess this whole time I kind of, I had veered, I was never really a religious person. Granted, I flirted with a bunch of them. I'd certainly done the New Age thing of like, let me go learn about all the world's religions so I can be semi-religious without having to interact with Christianity, which still had a bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
So finally, after a while, I'm getting pretty burnt out. They send me to a festival to go check out that end of the business. And, I still had all these idealisms about the New Age and like, oh, well, this is where people are really trying to, figure stuff out and synthesize all these things and come up with an answer that, works for everyone. And people are honestly like trying to grow themselves and dive deeper into all these fantasies of what was happening there. And when I went to the festival, that illusion broke very rapidly. And And yeah, it was absolute garbage. Just
What
garbage.
happened? What
It,
broke it?
I can't even, it wasn't even anything in particular. It was a bunch of things. It was one, no one was authentic, no one was honest. It was literally just a cool kid competition, but based around vaguely spiritual things instead of like, you know, whatever else cool kids compete over to be who the coolest,
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
popularity contest.
yeah.
And then the drug use, which I don't actually have at that time I smoked way too much pot. Um, and was interested and had played around with psychedelics and stuff, but like, they're roofing themselves to have a good night and just,
Wow.
like it just, I fell asleep at 4 o'clock every morning to the sound of the worst 90s freaking beach party announcer voice, playing bingo for all the people coming down off their drugs, like right next to us. At one point, you can hear someone win a sex toy and they're like putting on a display like just hedonism
Yeah,
is
yeah.
basically what it comes down to. And again, I'm not like against people exploring and unpacking that stuff, but there was nothing. It just felt gross, for
Hmm.
lack of a better. It just felt
Hmm.
really gross.
Mhm, mhm.
Taken as a whole thing. And that's not to say I didn't have fun and,
Yeah,
all that stuff. But
yeah.
so that did a number on me.
Hmm.
Um, it really broke all the fantasies I had about what was happening there. Oh, wow, we're almost out of time. Um, so I got a friend request from a guy named, well, I won't say his name actually,
Okay.
keep people from
Yeah.
going and looking for him. Um, got a friend request from the cult leader of cult number 4,
Huh.
just randomly, right
Yeah.
as I came back.
Yeah.
I added him and started having goofy conversations. This
Yeah.
was an entirely URL cult at the time, was not an in-person thing. Um, and then I had a really intense set of experiences. So then, and again, it gets weird. I don't, and again, it's so strange for me because I came from such this atheistic perspective, this extremely secular perspective. And then it's just like the intensity of the experiences over and over again just put me in a place I didn't know how to make sense of anything
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Which is strange because atheism is supposed to be just flat, it's just flat
Yeah, yeah,
secularism. And
yeah.
now you've got your axial, what did you call it? Your axial
Possession in like
possessions.
30 directions. There's like
Yes.
so many more dimensions that I
Yes.
don't know what to do with any of it.
Right.
Um, I try and so I went into a phase I call burning very hot. And this has happened to me a couple times throughout my life, but it's an enormous sudden burst of energy and I can see very clearly and I can see too clearly. I've had the experience of walking around and feeling particularly like I could feel people's subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this isn't like it's literally just what it felt like.
Yeah.
It could
Yeah.
totally have been my projections or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
Um, I'm going through this and it's difficult for me. I'm getting information I don't want and don't know how to turn it off. And the only thing I can think of to do is to submit. So I start praying for hours a day, not even like, please help, but not words, just submitting myself and being in the position was the only way I could get any rest from it, where it
Wow.
didn't feel like it was literally driving me insane.
Right.
Um, this continues for a while, about a week or two of trying to deal with this experience. And then one night when I'm praying, and keep in mind, I'm still not a Christian. I haven't looked into it really. I've opened myself up to it. I'm not as jaded as I used to be
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
I'm praying one night, and literally a being of light enters my room.
Yeah.
um, I'm like in the prayer position,
Yeah.
submitted to it,
Yeah.
and then it touches me on the forehead. And again, like I'm sober, totally
Yeah.
sober,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then when it touches me, it feels like this huge amount of emotional processing happens,
Huh.
and it digs up weird memories from my childhood, which I'm still not sure what they are, but and suddenly I don't have this problem anymore, and my diabetes goes away.
Wow.
Oh, and the weird part too is it touches me on the forehead, and then says, "Get up, stand, like get off your knees,
Right.
stand
Right.
up."
Right. 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 This is
Um,
this is like something right out of the Book of Revelation.
right, way too intense of an experience,
Yeah.
and I couldn't defend myself from it. Right, I
Yeah.
couldn't be like, "Oh, that was a crazy drug trip. All right, back to
Yeah.
normal,"
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and for the next 2 months, I'm trying to figure out what stand up means. What does it mean to stand?
Yes.
And right, this kind of constant realization of all the things I've submitted myself to.
Mm.
Um, and I'm like an inferno at this point, and it's
Mm-hmm.
weird. Life starts responding to me differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
so many of the synchronistic events and people interacting with me differently for no seeming reason. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but then right, it starts to waver, it starts to get funky, and I'm testing my blood sugar through all this,
Mm-hmm.
and it starts to go haywire.
Hmm.
So for 2 months, diabetes was literally gone.
Wow.
I don't know how any of this works. I'm just reporting the
Yep.
event as I experienced it.
Yep.
Um, and then it starts to waver, and I start getting spikes in my blood sugar again. And I notice that it often happens when I'm interacting with things in a particular way. So I start trying to change. I'm using it basically as like a guide.
Yep.
Like, am
Yep.
I where I'm supposed to be, or am I going off the track?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then I'm doing this. I try and take over the company, the Pinecone company, burning very hot. I'm not saying I wasn't pretty nuts at this point, because I was, but still stable. And that was like, okay, the only way I can make this work for me is if I'm at the top of it, where I have enough time to do other things I want to do, but I can't keep coming here and sitting in this room
Yep.
doing this thing
Yep.
all day, every day.
Yep.
So what's crazy is it almost worked, which is mind boggling to me. They literally almost were like handing me a company.
Huh.
And then I got sent away, basically because I threw a temper tantrum when my blood sugar spiked, because they are trying to like slow me down, and when your blood sugar spikes, it's very hard to regulate your emotions. Not that it was that crazy of a temper tantrum or anything, but so they're like, go take a week off and like go
Yep.
sort yourself out. I never came back. That was the end of the job.
Yep.
Which was fine. That's what I was, what I had accepted before taking the actions, was like, either I'll go find something new or whatever. Another month goes by, and my diabetes comes back full force. And it's more than just that. This entire new way of experiencing how my body is and my relationship to it and what existence is collapses back into its old form. And I'm extremely miserable at like, you got a taste of
Yes.
heaven, and then it's
Yes.
suddenly pulled away from you, and
Yes.
back to this blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I'm pretty mentally stable again as a benefit. Um,
Well,
not that I was ever
right.
really unstable in that period. It was fine, but yeah. And during that whole time, I was interacting with this cult, and that was a big part of it for me. With this stand up, was like,
Yeah.
oh, this guy came so I could tear him down, which is
Mm.
what I was familiar with, is tearing down cult leaders.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that didn't work with this person.
Hmm.
Even at my full ability, I couldn't tear him down.
Hmm.
So when I collapsed, I took it as a sign. I'd gotten kicked out of the job, and I took it as a sign, as God basically saying, go follow this guy around for a while.
Hmm.
And I didn't know if the point of that was to tear him down or to join him.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always had this dualistic role with it, but we are also basically out of time. So this might be a good spot to stop the story.
Okay. Well, we'll have to do it again. I wish we weren't out of time.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be a lot of people like, what happened to Nick? So we'll have to schedule
a nice different part of the story that we're
well, there's just so many interesting aspects to your story. I mean, the mental health story, I've just had plenty of opportunity to be with people in those spaces, and it's their story is just so common.
Yeah.
But also, life is a strange thing. You've had a very interesting life, Nick. Hasn't been dull.
That it has not. I would have actually, I wouldn't have minded a bit duller of a life.
Yeah, but you don't really get to choose.
No, you don't.
You did some things that helped it get not dull, but that's part of it. Well, yeah, I wish we could. Wish we had more time, but I've
got another one coming.
Stacked up. So let me know. Send me an email or something. Maybe we can because the queue is all filled up for March and starting to fill up in April already. So maybe we can be in at some point, because I want to get at a cult, because we talked about the cult a little bit at the meetup in San Jose. I remember that. So we can get more into that. But for those who are just listening on this, they're going to be like, what happened? And I know that there was a lot of good response to our first conversation. So
yes.
We'll see what happens. But we are out of time, but
yeah, we pushed it right to the edge there.
We did. Well, thank you again, Nick, and send me an email and we'll schedule the rest of the story.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay, Nick.
Good to talk to you, Paul.
Good to talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.